Welcome back. Today we are talking with Dr. Brian Goldman, the author of The Power of Teamwork, something a lot of us in organizations and our little groups at work and even in our family units really need to pay attention to, I think. There's something in your book you bring up quite a few times here, and it was in the opening story. Is there a way, or should we be learning from our mistakes? How can we take those mistakes and turn them into positives?
Well, if you've heard of the expression fail forward, I certainly I did a TED talk about 11 years ago called Doctors Make Mistakes. Can we talk about that? And it's been viewed by, close to 2 million people on the TED website. And the point I'm making there is that, if we don't learn from mistakes, we're doomed to repeat them. And certainly I come from a culture in medicine. This may not be the same in the corporate world or the organizational world, but I can tell you in the world of medicine, we have a deep kind of seated shame about mistakes. We think we're supposed to be perfect. We don't like talking about them because there's such an aversion to talking about mistakes that we're terrified that we're going to be shunned if we make a mistake. And if we talk about it, people get really uncomfortable. Now that some of that's changing, but the point is that we have been slow to recognize what the corporate world has understood, that you learn from mistakes, and aviation has learned from mistakes. That's what they've done is they've created a no shame, no blame, no name kind of system for accounting for errors and disseminating information about them. And in fact, these days, experts in aviation have become consultants to the healthcare field. You've got pilots, former pilots, retired pilots, people like Sully Sullenberger, the guy who landed the plane on the Hudson River. I had the privilege of interviewing him on White Coat Black Heart on my radio show. And he says that, aviation has some wonderful teachings for healthcare. And it's all based on creating a forum where people can talk about mistakes and deal with them in a way that makes the system safer. And so, yeah, it's absolutely essential, and it's absolutely essential for teamwork as well.
I'm kind of curious you talked about some of the personalities in our first segment, and sometimes there's a reluctance from people on a team who want to share their experiences when there is a mistake, whether it be a small one or a large one. Or any suggestions on how you can get that out of a person so that everyone can benefit from that mistake and you turn that into a positive without making someone feel as though they have made a big, terrible mistake. It's their fault. They're the weak link in the group or the team, sorry. How do you go about managing that?
Yeah, well, you're asking somebody who comes from a field where we've done it quite badly for a long, long time. We had, we have a mechanism called morbidity and mortality rounds, where we dissect cases that didn't go well, and the idea is that we learn from our mistakes, and we're all very very high and mighty about that. But in fact, culturally, in medical culture, morbidity and mortality rounds in the past traditionally were a vehicle for, a surgeon to kind of to apologize to colleagues for ruining the patina of perfection that that physicians and surgeons are supposed to have. I think that as I've already said, I think aviation has a better approach to reporting errors and dealing with them. But you're absolutely right. Certainly in healthcare, a lot of people feel uncomfortable talking about mistakes. But I think in part it's because they feel uncomfortable talking about what happened. Now that is starting to change. And one of the things that we're doing in healthcare is we are doing simulations. And even I can tell you, I have exam stress. That's one of the reasons. That's one of the engines that made me a physician. I'm perfectionistic, and I don't like being caught out making mistakes and being shown that I've made mistakes. But now we do a lot of simulations, and that's one of the techniques that helps to bind teams together, because you get to play out roles and you get to try out things. And if I were running a simulation, I would want people to try things. I would not want people to demonstrate that they always do the right thing at the right time every time, because there's a bias there. They're going to study. They're going to memorize stuff. They're going to cram into their short-term memory the stuff that they're supposed to do, and they're going to look and sound perfect until they're not expecting the same emergency, and it happens like 18 months later, and they don't do it well. I would say, if I were running simulations, I would say that I want you to try things. I want you to see what happens when you try things, and I want you to learn. And I want to create an environment where you feel calm and secure to say what you see as things unfold in the emergency. So first of all, having that kind of a simulation, and I'm going to talk about what you can do to maximize that kind of situation in a simulation or a real clinical scenario, like a real resuscitation. And then afterwards, have a debrief. And the purpose of the debrief is it could be a hot debrief or a cold debrief. A hot debrief occurs shortly after, and we usually start with what did we do well, what didn't work, and what could be better, what are suggestions for the next time this happens. And what you're doing is you're generating a whole group of suggestions that in the right environment can lead to substantive changes that make things better the next time. Now, the problem that you have talked about, that you have identified, is what I want to highlight. A lot of people on teams feel unsafe. They don't feel safe to say what they see. So, for instance, the nurse, in the Bromley case, who came into the operating room and in a still, quiet voice said, "I've brought the surgical airway." That was her way of saying, this is a can't intubate, can't ventilate scenario. She's dying. Somebody notice, please. But she was afraid to say it. And there's a language for doing that. And there's a way to be encouraged to do that. And I talk about it in the book. There's a chapter on visual thinking strategies. And this was a system that was developed by a couple of museum docents, museum researchers, who were trying to develop a system that would increase the engagement of lay people as museum goers and art gallery attendees, just to increase their enjoyment of the experience by increasing their engagement. Instead of having them stand and look at something and have no idea what they're supposed to be looking at, instead, you're plunked, a group of you of similar backgrounds. You don't have to be an expert to participate in this, or plunked in front of a work of art, and the facilitator asks you 3 questions. Question number 1, what do you see? Or what do we see here? And somebody, with a bit of chutzpah says, I see a couple. And the facilitator says, you see a couple. What more can we find? What are they doing? And somebody else says, I think they're embracing one another. And the second question, so there's 3 questions. The first question is, what do you see? The second question is, what do you see that makes you say that? That's the critical thinking piece. Okay, you think they're embracing. What do you see that makes you say that? Well, their arm positions look like they're hugging each other. But then the facilitator is continuing to paraphrase and then ask the third question, what more can we find? That encourages other members of the team or group to come forward with what they see. Somebody else says, I think they're wrestling with one another. Oh, again, back. Okay, so somebody else thinks they're wrestling with one another. What do you see that makes you say that? And they answer something about the arm position that makes it look like they're wrestling. And over time, they're exploring other things, incidental things that are in the image, the sculpture, the portrait. They may be looking at the point of view. Are we looking down on them, or are we looking across at them? Are they in a bed? Are they horizontal and we're looking down on them, or are they vertical? And slowly but surely, what's happening is that everybody is getting a collective team cognition for what's going on. You can take that approach, plunk a group of medical students or nursing students or physiotherapy students in front of a work of art and do exactly the same thing. And what you're getting is you're getting everybody on the team to develop the courage to feel safe to say what they see. That is utterly crucial in a resuscitation situation, where you've got an emergency, somebody's in a code blue, a cardiac arrest, and you need everybody to be engaged and looking, because one person in that group might be the only one to notice that the oxygen tubing is no longer connected to the supply of oxygen, and that's the reason why the oxygen level is dropping precipitously, not because there's an airway disaster, but because the oxygen needs to be reconnected. Or they might be noticing something else. For instance, I had a resuscitation recently of a woman who had an anaphylactic reaction to radio contrast, to CT dye. It happens. And my colleague was ordering agents, medications to raise the blood pressure. These are catecholamines. They stimulate, they increase the tension in the blood vessels to increase the blood pressure, and that's essential to preserve brain and heart and kidney function. But I also remembered that anaphylaxis causes a condition of shock, which is called distributive shock. And in that condition, all of the blood vessels have opened up too much, and whatever fluid they have that's maintaining their blood pressure in their arteries is now leaking out into the rest of their body. And so you have to pump them full of fluids. You might have to give them 4, 5, 6, 7 liters to raise their blood pressure to the point that you no longer need those medications to artificially raise the blood pressure. So my contribution was, I felt safe to say what I saw, and I explained it in the middle of the resuscitation, and it was a good suggestion, and it was something that was added. Another resuscitation, and one of my residents said, "Shall I get the tranexamic acid?" It was somebody who was bleeding. And tranexamic acid is a medication, a powerful medication that clots the blood. And yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you for suggesting that. And so we ended up giving a maximum dose of that. And so you can see that the critical factor there is that people feel comfortable to say what they see, to not feel that they're one-upping the leader, or that they're showing people up, or that they're pointing out mistakes, because they could be pointing out something that turns the resuscitation around into a better direction. But to do that, you need all hands on deck, and you need people who feel comfortable to say what they see. And I'm repeating it several times because it's so important.
It is, and I think a lot of people don't speak up because they are afraid of leadership, of which you talked about in the first segment, the good leaders.
And Alex, let me add something to that. I'm talking about healthcare as if it's the be all and end all. I mean, this, if the co-pilot of a certain Korean airliner, the navigator, wasn't afraid to speak truth to power and to tell the pilot that we're heading towards a mountain, they wouldn't have slammed into the mountain. That's the Tenerife disaster, and there were many human factors disasters in the 1970s and 80s. These are air disasters that led to something called crew resource management, which was a way of coping with the fact that no one person in an air flight emergency is in possession of all the facts and can see everything all at once. Their focus tends to narrow, and so they need the participation of everybody else with skin in the game. So that includes the pilot, the cockpit crew, the cabin crew, the air traffic controllers, the maintenance crew, and yes, even the passengers, because a passenger might be the first person to notice that there's a funny smell emanating in the cabin, or that there's some liquid dripping from one of the engines. And wouldn't the pilot want to know that? Yeah, they would want to know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in aviation, and it's also in business. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
That it's important to say what you see.
You talked about the going to the art museum as that would be kind of a fun outing to do, and have a look at a painting and get different perspectives on what people see and what they're feeling. But that's not the only way. There was an example or two in here of something really fun that I don't think people would think of.
Yeah, I think you're talking about improv, comedy.
Yeah.
Just pretending that you're on stage with a partner, and you can there's an exercise. There are many exercises, but this one is pretty simple to explain. It's called yes and, as opposed to yes but and no. Yes and is an exercise, an improv, comedy improv exercise in which you have two people on stage and they are given a scenario, and the more bizarre the scenario, the funnier the scenario, the better, the more absurd. And whatever the scenario, the first person, the first volunteer, the first victim has to riff off of that scenario, has to say something about that scenario. Whatever the first person says, the second person must listen carefully to what the first person is saying and respond as soon as they finish. Respond with two words, yes, which is implicit acceptance of what the other person has said, and the word and, which means that they accept what the other person has said and they build upon it. They can't change the subject. They got to go with it. For instance, scenario might be the two of you, we now have the first, interstellar station on the planet Mars. And the two of you have been assigned to fix the toilets, which are once again on the fritz. First person has to go with that, and they can talk about weightlessness and whatever they want to do. But the idea is twofold. First of all, that the first person is actually listening. Sorry, the second person is actually listening to what the first person is saying. And I mention that because how often have we had this very human experience of thinking that we're listening to other people in a team meeting when all we're doing is just waiting patiently for the person who has the floor to pause so that we can jump in with what we've been dying to say for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That is not listening. That is waiting for your opportunity to jump in, and that is not, and in fact, an astute team leader might actually say, can we stay on topic? Or what would you like to say about what he's just said or what she's just said? And, hopefully they feel comfortable to say, I wasn't listening. I was just waiting for my turn. And I would be, and I'd say, thank you for that observation. Thank you for that. Thank you for your honesty. Can you hold your thought until we come back to a moment where we can talk about that? Or gather your thoughts, and maybe you want to hear what some of the other people are saying about what that person just said. So what they're doing is they're kind of doing visual thinking strategies, but listening is really important, and then acceptance. Why is this important? Because in medicine we tend to play yes, but. Yes, that's a great idea, and we tried it last year and it didn't work. Or yes, that's an intriguing idea. I can quote you 5 papers that show you it'll never work. That's, you understand that yes and facilitates conversation. Yes, but kills conversation. And of course, the worst example is no, which is basically a complete repudiation of what the other person said. And people do it. Sometimes leaders will do it in a funny way. They'll make a snappy joke. They'll say next, and everybody will laugh. Oh, because nobody ever listens to this person. Ha, isn't that funny? No, it's terrible because you're missing the wisdom of everybody in the group. You're selectively avoiding hearing from everybody when in fact, whatever idea you have will be better because of everybody's participation. You can almost guarantee that.
I've been in many meetings in my lifetime where yes, but is really the focus of the meeting. No matter what gets said, the next person is always yes, but. And the leader just lets it go on, and everybody leaves the meeting wondering, why were we even here?
Yeah, so you're describing a place where a meeting where good ideas go to die. And really the person who says yes but is placing themselves hierarchically in a higher position with respect to the person who made the first suggestion. Yes, but it is condescending. It's a bit rude, and maybe that gets back to the personalities of people who are good with teamwork versus those who aren't. People who are a little bit on the narcissistic side, or like putting down others, and think that if it's a good idea, they would have come up with it. Anyway,
yeah.
Call me silly.
We only have 4 minutes left, believe it or not. Time's just flying by here. So why don't we jump to our last thing that I wanted to ask you is, what can leaders and others, not they don't have to have a big title, but what can they start or stop doing right away to help develop maybe the group they're in right now and turning it into a team?
Well, I think there's several things they can do. One of the, I certainly the there's nothing wrong with going back to first principles, acknowledging, asking everybody in the group, do you think we are a group of individuals or a team? What could we do better? How can I help you feel like, more of a sense of team spiritedness in what we're doing here, and get beyond, and I would ask everybody, what does it mean to be on a team? And I would use that opportunity to ask questions like, what should we, why are we here? You know, and ask, like, and don't be afraid to make whatever suggestions you have. Are we here to make profits? Are we here to treat customers right? Are we here to have a neat environment? Are we here, is this a place, do we want to be a place where they're really good at retaining staff? Is it a place where people help? When people need help? Is it a place where you feel comfortable asking for help? Is it a place where if management tells you there's going to be a brand new initiative or a project, is it a place where your environment, where your perspective is considered important? I think that I think a lot of this comes from leaders. I think a leader would do well to get to know better people, everybody on the team, and call them in for individual meetings, get to know them, get to know their likes and dislikes, their personalities, what's going on with their families, how big their families are, how many kids they have, what their hobbies are. I'm just throwing out things, but the more they get to know them, the more they get to know what their needs are, their emotional needs, their physical, their monetary needs, and their superpower. As people have returned to work from working from home, I've said, why don't you make a game of it? Why don't you make it fun? Gather everybody together at work and have them put name tags, silly name tags on that say hi, my name is, even though they've known each other for years, and have everybody in the group name somebody else's superpower. So instead of self-promotion, I think it resonates better when you have noticed another member of the team's superpower, that so-and-so's visionary, and this person's really good with customers, and this is a person who everybody on the team gets along with, even when there's conflict in the team. This is a person who has a steel trap for institutional memory, who remembers every rule and knows why the rule was changed and when it was changed. So that's the person you ask when you want to know how to get things done. The person who knows all the procedures, the person who knows the Hansard of politics, of parliament.
That sounds good. I hope everyone's listening, because a lot of the things that you conveyed, I know the book primarily talks around medicine, and that is your background, but all those principles can definitely be used in the office environment, whether it be government, whether it be a bank, anything. There's so much good information in the book, and so congratulations on it, and thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Alex, it's been a pleasure.
And everyone, again, Dr. Goldman's book, The Power of Teamwork. There's a lot of good information. I recommend it to everybody. It doesn't show on video very much, but this book has got a lot of dog ears in it, with different things that cropped up as I was reading, going, oh, I like that example. Oh, that's interesting. So congratulations on the book. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I really appreciate it. And everyone watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.